Hello and welcome to The Fast and the Curious. My name is Christian Hugill, and if you listened all the way to the end of our last episode, the Belgian Grand Prix debrief, you'd have heard me talking about Speedos and me being allergic to the lining of swimming shorts. That is because that had been my intention to be my last episode of the podcast for a couple of weeks before me going on holiday. But Formula One waits for no man or woman, my friend, and we are here with an emergency episode because, as you'll know, probably through hearing it on the grapevine, and I'm imagining the title of this episode, Carlos Sainz has signed for Williams for the 2025 season and beyond. There is no Greg James on this episode. He's off team principaling elsewhere. Betty is still covering the Olympics. But as a team, we've sort of always said that our bar for emergency episodes at the moment is Carlos Sainz announcing driver move or above. And it has now been confirmed that we knew he was leaving Ferrari because they very much signed Lewis Hamilton, but we now know he is going to be at Williams to join Alex Albon from next year. So no Greg, no Betty. So what I will do is talk to myself for the next 20 minutes. I wouldn't mind doing that, but it'd be a terrible listen. That's not what we'll do. Instead, we've had so many thoughts and feelings about this already. Who better to go to than our very own Carlos Sainz superfan? You'll have heard her on the podcast a few weeks ago. She can be the voice of F1 fans everywhere. Welcome, Sainz superfan Rach. Rach, welcome back. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Christian. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. You were on a race debrief podcast. It was a race I wasn't at, so I'm thinking it was Barcelona, was it, Rach?
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
I remember this. You were on the track, you were talking to me and Betty, you said you were a Carlos Sainz superfan, so I'm guessing this is major news in your life, Rach. Just tell us how you're feeling about Carlos now, from next year at least, being a Williams driver.
Yeah, actually, I think because it's been a rumour for so long, I've had time to think about it. It was first mentioned quite a few months ago, wasn't it? So in the beginning, I was a bit, oh gosh, obviously we'd rather him go to Red Bull or Merc or any of the top teams. But the more I've been thinking about it, I'm quite happy about it. I'm a big Alex Albon fan as well, so it's like a really nice driver lineup for me, and it feels really special that my favourite driver is going to be driving for a British team. And I think Carlos's driving style and his ability to strategize is going to really work with Williams, who I think are on an upward trajectory as well. And I can see him working really well with James Bowles. And I feel like the team are going to really take on board a lot of his experience and his suggestions. So, yeah, I think after a couple of weeks contemplation, I'm quite happy about it.
Rach, if anything, as the sort of resident F1 geek on this podcast, that was a too good answer. That sort of covered everything. So I don't think we need to carry on now. Join us next time. No, I fully agree with you. I think, is this a surprise? No, it isn't. It's been rumoured for a while now. The big other options were Audi, or which are Sauber at the moment and going to be Audi. But Rach, you said just then that originally as a Sainz fan, you were hoping for Mercedes or Red Bull. Being realistic, from what I've heard in the paddock from people I've been speaking to, I don't think they were ever realistic options for Carlos. I think Mercedes have got their hearts set on Kimi Antonelli.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't think Red Bull, they are not envisaging losing Max, and I don't think they think putting Carlos next to Max would work. I don't think that's the vibe they're going for in the team, so I don't think Red Bull's ever been an option. So I think Carlos sort of thought, well, I need to look long-term here, and that's what he's done. He's looked long-term, and he's thought Williams are his best option. Rach, we're going to get onto some listener questions. You are a listener to this podcast, and we're going to give you priority because you're here. So you are. So, Rach, any questions from you on this?
Yeah, so I saw on, I think it was X a couple of days ago, when the contract was rumoured that there was going to be an exit clause, or there is an exit clause in it for Carlos to be able to leave pretty much like whenever he wants, if, quote unquote, a better option appears for him in 25 or 26. I haven't seen anything about it since. So do you know if that's true? Do you know if that's an actual thing?
The short answer to this, Rach, is do I know that to be the case? Absolutely not. F1 teams do not make contracts and the details of those public. And even when you hear F1 journalists say, well, my understanding is this contract's been written in, this contract's been written in, we never fully know for sure. And Williams aren't going to announce this and go, yes, we've signed Carlos. Because one of the big surprises is it's not just, I was sort of half expecting him to sign for Williams, but I wondered if it would be on a 1-year deal or a 1+1 deal. Williams have made a big thing of saying, this is a multi-year contract for 25, 26 and beyond. And that's massive for Williams. But of course, in sport in general, and not just in Formula One, contracts only mean so much. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there are contract clauses. For example, one might have been negotiated that said, if a team that finished above Williams in the Constructors' Championship offered me a contract, I can go. Given what an attractive option Carlos is, it would not have surprised me. And given he wants to, make himself available, say, for example, spectacularly, Max went to Mercedes and a Red Bull seat became available, Carlos would want to make himself available in the driver market. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if he'd said to the likes of Alpine, Sauber and Williams, all right, whoever's going to give me the best get-out clause or the most freedom can have me. So it wouldn't surprise me at all, Rach, but I don't think we're going to know 100% until it actually happens, because that's sort of the secretive nature of F1 contracts.
Yeah, true. I feel like to get him on a multi-year contract, there probably have to be something like that.
Rach, any more questions from you before we dive into our sizable listener inbox?
Yeah, I've got one more. I'm just wondering, what do you think Carlos has seen at Williams, or what do you think Williams have kind of sold Carlos? Do you think that they've got something up their sleeves regarding the new regulation changes, or do you think it's a case of Carlos not really liking his odds that Sauber have been?
Well, there's two questions there. I think what Williams have seen in Carlos is pretty straightforward for me. They've seen a race winner, really, up there. He's not quite proven himself to be a special Lewis or Max, but he's right up there with the Lando Norris levels of talent of drivers that can win Grand Prix for you. As for what he's seen in Williams, Rach, what do you think he's seen? Because I've got my own theories, but as a Carlos fan, what do you think he's seen?
I think it's the opportunity to be part of Williams coming to the front again and getting back to the former glory days and bringing them back to the front. I think, being able to join a team at the top and just, continue on that trajectory that they already got themselves on, is it a much of a challenge? Not as much as joining, Williams and trying to get them back to where they were decades ago. So I think, not that I know him, obviously I wish I did, but I think Carlos as a person would value, that being able to help a team kind of like from the ground back up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Carlos is experienced enough to be able to give development feedback on the car. He's an old head. Well, he's not an old head, is he? I think he's younger than me, but you know what I mean? He's experienced enough, is Carlos Sainz. And I agree with everything you've said, Rach. Absolutely every word of it. No matter who you talk to in the paddock, they are complimentary about both James Vowles and the work James Vowles has done. Now, on track, you could look at it that Williams have taken a bit of a step back from where they were last year to where they were this year. Points have been harder to come by. But everybody I've spoke to seems very confident that is short-term pain for long-term gain. And all the rumours you hear about the 2026 changes where engines will become such an important part of Formula One suggest that Mercedes are doing really well in terms of their engine development. And of course, Mercedes have a close link with Williams. So, and I have a Mercedes engine and will do for 2026. So it doesn't surprise me at all if Carlos thought, you know what, I'd quite like in 26 to have a Mercedes engine.
Yeah.
So I think that is a really important factor as to why Carlos has decided, okay, if I'm going to have to pick a long-term option, this is my long-term option. And I guess for fans like yourself, Rach, Williams they're a big name in Formula One. They've got huge history, right?
Yeah, of course. They're one of the OGs, and they're the British team. They're only one of them and McLaren, like the British teams I support. So yeah, like I said in the beginning, I think it didn't make sense to me immediately in the beginning, but only because you automatically just want the absolute best contract for your driver. But yeah, after a couple of weeks thinking about it, I actually think this is a really good step for him.
And a lot of people will be thinking, well, hang on, he was linked with Audi, and he has been. He's been heavily linked with Audi ever since Audi first floated the idea of coming into Formula One, which we know they will be doing as they've bought the Sauber team. And of course, Alpine have entered the chat recently as well in the battle to get him. Rach, are you surprised that he hasn't gone to either of those two teams? How do you assess that one?
I don't really know. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't go to Audi, to be honest, because like you said, the second that there was news out that Audi were going to be, a team, he was linked to them. So I don't know. I think maybe he's just had more time to think on Williams and Alpine. And then as far as Sauber and Audi, I'm not quite sure why he didn't go with it, to be honest.
Well, I think the fact there's been big changes at Sauber recently show you there's a lot of work still to do there. I think Carlos looked at that and thought, yeah, I want a long-term project, but actually getting them to the front seems a very, very long-term project. So if I'm looking at a long-term option, Williams are more attractive to me than either of those two teams. So that's why it doesn't surprise me, Rach. I think all the rumours coming out of Alpine about them dropping their own engines, it doesn't fill me full of confidence. Sauber are already pretty slow, got a lot of work to do. Doesn't surprise me, to be honest with you, Rach.
Yeah, agreed. It's definitely up in the three. Williams, the more settled. So yeah, completely agree.
Right, let's dig into some of the listener questions that have come into us on the socials. Jessica asks, what other options did he have? And does this mean Kimi is off to Merck? We've sort of already touched on this. I don't think Carlos realistically had Red Bull or Mercedes as options. I don't think so. And Jessica, very simply, does this mean Kimi's off to Merck? I've been saying this for months now. I think that is 90% certain. I'd be massively surprised. I think they've been on that sort of thought process for a while. And even without Kimi's recent F2 form, his form in Formula 2, he's been really impressive recently with the drives there. So I think we will see Kimi Antonelli in that seat next year next to George Russell. I'm 95% certain we will. Rach, as an F1 fan, does that excite you? A bright, young hotshot next to Mr. Russell?
Yeah, and I think so. I think I'd enjoy watching him shake George up a little bit, but with a bit of a fear in him, to be honest.
Yeah.
Having somebody so young in as well, it's just like, a nice change, like a fresh injection of one of the younger drivers straight up from Formula 2. I've been thinking this year, we could really use more Formula 2 drivers coming up rather than, the re-signing of a certain few drivers. So yeah, I'm excited to see how he does really. But yeah.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you there, Rach. Entirely agree with you. So yeah, I think that'll be exciting to see Kimi at Merck, and I think that was already looking likely. I don't think this really changed it too much. I don't think Carlos was ever a realistic proposition for Mercedes. And then Katie asks, "Yay for Carlos, but as an American, I'm sad for Logan. What does this mean for him?" Katie, I'm really sorry to say to you, and I know we have lots of people from America and American fans listening to this. I don't think we'll see Logan in Formula One next year. Me and Greg discussed this on the last episode, the Belgian Grand Prix debrief. We obviously wish him hugely well because he's a friend of this podcast. He's been on it loads of times. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a talented racing driver. I think the reality is in a season and a half, we've seen him have enough time to prove himself. And ultimately, unfortunately, and I say this with real sadness, I don't think Logan's shown quite enough to justify his place on the Formula One grid. And it sort of shows you, the first two drivers we featured on this podcast were Oscar Piastri and Logan Sargeant. And doesn't that epitomise the harsh world of Formula One? Oscar's flourished and looks future world champion material. But for every young driver who does that, unfortunately, Logan's one of those that shows this is the highest level of motorsport. The wording on the statement seemed to confirm to me that Logan will get to see out the end of the season. So, yeah, it's sad for Logan, isn't it, Rach? You never like seeing talented young drivers like him ultimately lose their seat.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? And I think anybody who goes to Williams, you really do have to be the best of the two drivers. It's just as simple as that, isn't it?
It's a great point. Because, yeah, he's been up against Alex Albon, who is a real talent. And unfortunately, when you've got Alex dragging that car into the points or near the points, and Logan not doing it, it sort of highlights the difference. So listen, Greg said this in the last episode, we'd love to, as a podcast, keep up a relationship with Logan. We think he's a great guy, and we'd love to follow his progress in future racing series. So all the very best to Logan on what will be a really difficult day for him, and shows you the cutthroat nature of top-level sport. Rach, anything you'd like to get off your chest? How are you feeling now we've got this? We've had a proper discussion on this. You're a Carlos Sainz fan. Where does this leave you as a Sainz fan going into 2025?
Well, I was always going to be a fan of whatever team he went to anyway, but I'm a Williams fan anyway, so it's made it easy for me. I just need to buy the merch now. But I'm excited to see what happens with the rest of the seats now. I wonder if now that Carlos being the, what he was described as the cork in the bottle or something, wasn't he? I wonder if now he's gone, we're going to see a couple more interesting moves over the next few weeks. But
yeah, I
feel like silly season's been dragged out quite long this year, so I'm excited to see where everybody else goes, hoping now this shifts everyone else.
We've obviously, officially speaking, Sergio Perez has signed a new contract and is in that Red Bull next season. We all know that's not as certain as Sergio makes it out to be, so that remains a possibility. We need to obviously wait for formal confirmation that Antonelli is going to Mercedes. I expect he will. Alpine, there is a question mark as to who will be alongside Pierre Gasly. I think Jack Doohan is in with a shout of that seat. I think Mick Schumacher is an outside chance of that seat.
Yeah.
RB, we know Yuki Tsunoda will be with them next year, unless he were to get what would be a very surprising Red Bull call-up. Where will Liam Lawson slot in? Where will Daniel Ricciardo slot in? Sauber, we know that Nico Hülkenberg will be in one of the seats. Who will get that other one? Valtteri Bottas is still around. Zhou is still around. Will either of the two keep their seats? And we know it will be Ollie Behrman and Esteban Ocon at Haas. So that's how it's shaping up. A couple of seats still likely to fill. And we'll, of course, keep you updated on the Fast and the Curious as those seats get filled. And something else very worth mentioning. We love Williams on this podcast. They have been some of our real backers on the Fast and the Curious, and we've been very grateful for that. Alex and Logan have been on a number of times. I have had approximately 3 million DMs, and producer Jimmy tells me the Fast and the Curious has had another 10 million DMs saying that two things. Williams will be a completely appendixless team for the start of the 2025 season.
Yeah.
Two very light drivers, 0 appendix. That's great. And loads of people saying, does that now mean Carlos will be on the podcast? Listen, we hope so. Rach, you'd like to see that, wouldn't you?
If you need a fan to speak to Carlos, I will do that on behalf of all the Carlos fans. I nominate myself.
Your nomination has been locked and noted. Yes, we would love to get Carlos on the podcast. Rach, listen, been lovely to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on and being our reserve driver for this episode, and our resident Carlos Sainz superfan. I've no doubt we'll speak to you again. Thanks, Rach.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Rach. Lovely to talk to you. Now, what I'm going to try and do is go on holiday, as I'd promised to do at the end of the last episode. How many times in the history of this podcast have we said, we'll be back at this point? Then something happens and we come back sooner than expected. It summarizes why you need to subscribe on Spotify or Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can watch every episode. And just because I'm off on a little summer break, it doesn't mean the podcast will. Greg James and Karun Chandak will be here on the next episode to talk about the life and times of Karun, go through some of your questions to Karun. I mean, it's an opportunity to ask an ex-Formula One driver a question. Why wouldn't you take it? So Greg and Karun will see you very soon. I'll see you after I've done a bit of tanning on the beach, and the Fast and the Curious will be back very soon. Bye for now.